So here we are, talking about the Vancouver Canucks and more updates on what they could be doing with their draft picks this year. Now, we have made endless videos talking about the prospects at the very, very top of the draft list. Oh, the Vancouver Canucks have themselves the highest odds at drafting number 1, which means we should talk about number 1 overall guys. We can talk about the Gavin McKennas of the world. We can talk about Stenberg and Keaton Verhoff, not to mention Chase Reed. The number 1 center, as projected by Elite Prospects' consolidated ranking, is Tynan Lawrence out of Boston University. But I think it's very fair to say that Tynan Lawrence out of Boston University hasn't really had the best season, especially when you consider just the overall level of point production that he has had. Meanwhile, there is another center, or two, that has been making the rounds on Canucks social media discourse. You have Viggo Bjork, who can play center out of Djurgårdens in the SHL, and you also have Caleb Malhotra. Now, just to get it out of the way, I'm pretty sure most of y'all know this, but if you're not, Caleb Malhotra, the last name sounds familiar? Yeah, he's the son of Manny Malhotra, who was one of the most beloved Vancouver Canucks in his heyday. Manny, of course, wasn't always a Canuck. He was a Hab, he was a Ranger, he was a Blue Jacket. There were a number of teams that Manny Malhotra played for, but he had some of his best days with the Vancouver Canucks. He didn't score many points, but he was a really strong pro. He won a ton of faceoffs, and he was a perfect bottom 6 guy to help facilitate play the right way, and a penalty killer. The fun part is, Caleb Malhotra's scouting report, in a vacuum, you just look at the gist of it, a lot of people would say, hey, he's like Manny, except he can also score. And we have seen a lot of point scoring out of Caleb Malhotra this season. He had 26 points in 44 Chilliwack Chiefs games last year in the BCHL, so Junior A hockey here in British Columbia. But this season in the OHL for the Brantford Bulldogs, the guy's up there at 84 points in 67 games, 29 goals, 55 assists. That's a really good marker. Say what you want about whether or not the CHL is weaker compared to previous years, which I think is an objective truth when you look at some of the guys that the CHL is missing compared to last year. No more Gavin McKenna, no more Keaton Verhoff, no more Caden Lindstrom, etc., etc., etc. All these guys leaving to go to the NCAA. But Caleb Malhotra is one of these top OHL guys. And even though you do have a consolidated ranking of 13th, there are some scouting outlets that have him ranked higher. For this list right here, you have the Hockey News Kennedy, who has Malhotra ranked at number 5. You have Craig Button, who has him at 11. Cam Robinson has him at 8. Elite Prospects has him at 7. Bukala has him at 5. So does Sam Constantino. Daily Faceoff has him at 8, and McQueen's has him at number 9. That's a little bit conservative as well, because we have seen some other conversations pop up on various scouting platforms that debate whether or not Malhotra could even be a top 3 pick this season. He is one of the highest-rated centers in this upcoming NHL draft, and when it comes to the Vancouver Canucks, well, it's been very clear. They say they need a center. For as good as Marco Rossi is, for as good as Elias Pettersson was, and for as good as Braden Coots could be, getting an absolute peak number 1 center seems to be a priority for this Vancouver Canucks squad. Which is why, yesterday, Rick Dhaliwal tweeted this out that the Vancouver Canucks are in full force to see center Caleb Malhotra in Brantford tonight. Vancouver had 4 representatives at the Bulldogs game yesterday trying to see what Caleb Malhotra could be. Phil Golding, Patrik Allvin, Todd Harvey, and Ryan Johnson all made their way out to the press box, just trying to sit down, trying to absorb the game. Obviously, you're looking at it like, yeah, well, Malhotra is one of the top prospects. Of course. Patrik Allvin, who is a very heavily scouting GM, is going to do his due diligence and be in the right spots to watch these guys. He'd be not doing his job if he wasn't doing that, right? And that's a very fair point. But with this conversation on the Canucks seeing Caleb Malhotra in force, we do have ourselves some responses that vary based on what Canucks fans seem to think about this. Greg says, I really want him if the Canucks drop from 1 to 3. Another reply says, I doubt they're looking at Malhotra unless they plan on trading down if they get third. Caleb will never be taken top 3. His 13 to 16-year-old stats are terrible. This is the only year he did anything. They are probably looking at guys for the 33rd overall spot. Now, Van Can, I hate to break it to you, buddy, but this guy, he's not going 33rd. He'll go a lot higher than that. Another reply says, if we draft for position over best available with the top 3 pick, we deserve all the failure and hardship in the world. Another reply says, maybe if we drop to 3rd, he's a serious possibility. I can't help but feel if that were the case, it wouldn't be too hard to trade down a few picks to get him at 6 to 10. Idiots will draft for positional need at 3 instead of taking the best player available. If they take him at 3 with the top pick or at 3, they should all be fired. So Canucks fans, on the Rick Dhaliwal tweet, they're not looking at this idea kindly. The idea that Vancouver could potentially drop to number 3, and instead of taking a Chase Reed or a Keaton Verhoff, they take Caleb Malhotra instead, because the common consensus amongst these fans is, hey, they'd be reaching for a guy who isn't projected to go that high when looking at many of these draft lists. With that said, we had ourselves Canucks fans on the Our Canucks sub going out there and discussing this idea as well. They're a little bit more nicer to Canucks management and Canucks scouting staff when acknowledging this Caleb Malhotra idea. Crayon Olympic says if the team scouting staff isn't heavily looking at least the top 5 expected picks, they aren't doing their jobs. I would hope that all of Malhotra, Reed, Verhoff, Stenberg, and McKenna at minimum have had substantial scouting from the Canucks staff. It's not like they have much else to do right now anyway. Thomas Trance has been saying on Canucks Talk that Allvin has been going everywhere to scout recently. He's been spotted watching Reed, McKenna, and Stenberg. As you said, I'd be disappointed if this wasn't the case. They're just doing their due diligence, and it's not like there's anything more important than the draft for Vancouver. They're doing their due diligence. Caleb has become the consensus best center of the draft and likely a top 5 pick. They better be scouting him heavily. Let's go out there and see some of these other comments over here. If we trade down a couple of picks, sure. I don't think value-wise he's better than Verhoff and maybe even Reed. Not saying I don't want him, but just be smart about it. I think he is at least on par with value when it comes to Verhoff easily. Reed? Maybe not. Verhoff hasn't been good. I'm sure he will be good, but Chase Reed has been downright dynamic, plus he's got good size himself. Reed is the better skater by miles. Have you watched him? The kid is insane. Verhoff's flaw is his skating. Picking anyone that high with that as a flaw is a scary proposition. Reed has the highest offensive upside with an improving defensive game. He might even go 2 because of how Stenberg's play has dipped. So, this does bleed into more draft-related debates as to whether or not Verhoff or Chase Reed or Caleb Malhotra should be that guy. They're that desperate for a 2C, huh? This kid has legit first-line center potential. Will he be a superstar? No, but he could very well be a Scheifele-style center. What don't you like about his game? So, at the end of the day, Caleb Malhotra, is he the inevitable Canucks 3rd overall pick should they slip from 1 to 3? Or is he just another task that the Vancouver Canucks have to do due diligence on in order to properly say that they are doing their work the best way that they can? Is this more of a formality and a checkbox that they need to click off? Or is it a legit interest in whether or not they take this guy number 3? If the Canucks slip to 3, and Stenberg and McKenna go 2-1 or 1-2, who do you want to see the Vancouver Canucks take? Are you a Chase Reed guy? A Caleb Malhotra guy? I'm leaning towards Reed myself, but you can let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Is Tynan Lawrence your guy? Maybe he's up there. How do you feel about all this draft talk? Let me know in the comments all your opinions. I hope you enjoyed this video. And Bye.